Isn't it interesting how the mind, without even trying, begins to shift? As you hear these words, as you follow these thoughts, as you allow yourself, perhaps for the first time, to notice just how much easier life becomes when competition dissolves into curiosity. Because isn't that what you've always wanted? Not to measure, not to fight, not to stand on a battlefield where no one wins, but instead to step into something more, something greater, a way of seeing the world where every person, every experience, every encounter becomes a gift, a lesson, an opportunity. And if there was a time long ago when you believed that the only way to be safe, to be strong, to be worthy was to be better, faster, stronger, smarter, then isn't it fascinating how now you can notice that the greatest strength, the deepest wisdom, the truest confidence comes not from being better than, but from being with people, with experiences, with yourself. Because there was a moment, wasn't there, when someone, somewhere, made you believe that you had to win, that life was a race, that others were either above you or beneath you, that your worth, it was measured by how high you could climb, or how many you could surpass. And yet as you hear this now, something inside you knows that was never true. Because imagine, just for a moment, what happens when you step outside of that game? When you stop looking at people as obstacles, threats, enemies to defeat, and instead you see them, truly see them, a person, a story, a journey. And what if instead of competition, you felt connection? And what if instead of resentment, you felt curiosity? And what if instead of measuring, ranking and comparing, you simply noticed? Because isn't that a better way to live? A freer way to live? A way to move through the world without the weight of always having to prove, always having to defend, always having to keep score. And as you feel that shift now, as your mind opens to this new way of seeing, a part of you already knows that from this moment forward, you don't need to compete. You don't need to compare. You don't need to carry that old burden anymore, because you're not here to win against others. You're here to win with them, to build, to create, to share, to celebrate. And isn't that a better game to play? Because it's fascinating, isn't it, how the mind, it effortlessly, naturally begins to shift, as if something deep within you, it's always known that there was a different way, a lighter way, a way of being that feels free. Because for so long, it was as if the world was a battleground, wasn't it? As if every glance, every interaction, every moment was another test, another measure of where you stood, higher, lower, ahead, behind. But what happens now when you notice that was never really true? What happens now when you begin to sense just how much of that it was never about you at all? Because somewhere, sometime, a voice, maybe not yours, maybe not even one you remember, whispered a rule into your mind. Life is a competition. And isn't it strange how a belief like that, it can slip in unnoticed, like a seed planted long ago, growing roots so deep that you forgot it was ever planted at all. But right now, something is shifting, isn't it? Because as you hear these words, as you follow these thoughts, you begin to realize that belief was never yours to begin with. It was borrowed, inherited, a trick of the mind, passed from one to another, like a game no one remembers choosing to play. And yet, what if you stopped playing? What if in this moment you step back and you saw it all differently? Because isn't it curious how the greatest lives, the happiest people, the most fulfilled souls, they're not the ones who beat everyone else, but they're the ones who stop needing to. What if you could simply let go of the old patterns, the old games, the old need to measure, compare, rank and judge? Because what happens when you see people not as threats, but as teachers, not as rivals, but as reflections, not as obstacles, but as allies? Because right now, in this very moment, something inside you it already understands that the people you once feared, once envied, once resented, they were never the enemy. They were never against you. They were simply living their own stories. And isn't it beautiful how different the world looks when you no longer need to fight it? Because you were never here to beat anyone. You were here to learn, to grow, to share, to connect. And doesn't it feel good to know that you can? Because from this moment forward, every person you meet becomes a door, a key, a pathway to something greater. And isn't that so much better, so much lighter, so much truer? Because it was never about winning. It was always about becoming.